Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive controversy that's been absolutely blowing up online. We are diving into the recent KVS, or Kendriya Vidyalaya Sangathan, exam scoring allegations, specifically breaking down a detailed report by educator Rohit Vadwan. Our goal here is to neutrally map out the claims, the data, and the really deep concerns being raised in the source material. We're going to look at some shocking numbers, alleged discrepancies, and calls for systemic reform. All right, let's jump right in.
Let me ask you something right off the bat. Can 204 marks be less than 168? Now, basic logic tells us no way, right? But according to the source video we're looking at today, this exact mathematical contradiction is the central mystery of this whole KVS exam controversy. The educator presents a mind-bending situation where a higher score somehow resulted in a failure, while a much lower score was apparently the benchmark for passing.
To get how we even arrived at this bizarre question, we really need to understand the sheer scale of this exam. Over 15 lakh, that is 1.5 million candidates filled out forms for this. This isn't just some small local test, This is a massive public examination with the hopes, the careers, and the futures of an enormous number of aspiring teachers on the line. When a system this huge has an alleged glitch, the ripple effects are just staggering.
But wait, it's not just about the crowd size. It's also about the massive investment these people made. The source makes a huge point about this. Candidates paid an application fee of 2,000 rupees just to sit for the Tier 1 exam. If you multiply that by 1.5 million people, you are looking at an absolutely massive financial pool collected by the authorities. The video argues that with that kind of money on the table, candidates have a fundamental right to expect flawless execution, total fairness, and absolute transparency. And on top of that financial stress, there was a crazy amount of academic pressure. According to the source, these candidates were thrown into an incredibly high-pressure environment. They were given literally just 1 month of prep time. And within that single month, they had to adapt to a brand new exam pattern and master a completely new syllabus. The educator really highlights the immense dedication these candidates poured into this highly stressful, super condensed timeline. They gave it everything they had.
Section 1. The anomaly, score versus result.
So the results finally drop, and the source highlights this one really troubling case of a PGT mathematics candidate. Just look at the striking discrepancy here. This person achieved an impressive score of 204 marks in the Tier 1 exam, but their official status for moving on to the Tier 2 interview, it literally reads, not shortlisted. Now, without knowing the cutoff, you might just think, well, it was super competitive. The cutoff must have been higher than 204. But this student wasn't about to just sit back and guess.
Section 2. The RTI revelation, seeking official answers. To figure out this mysterious rejection, the candidate actually took official action. They filed a Right to Information, or RTI request, essentially asking the board, hey, what were the exact passing marks? The official response they got stated that the cutoff for Tier 1 PGT mathematics in the unreserved category was a score of 168. Let that sink in for a second. The official documented passing line was 168.
Which brings us right back to that mathematical paradox from the beginning. If 204 is indisputably greater than 168, how did this candidate fail? The source video neutrally presents this core argument, questioning the very integrity of the grading and sorting algorithm the exam board is using. How can a system officially state a cutoff of 168, yet formally reject someone scoring 204? The educator points out that this leaves candidates completely in the dark, wondering if they genuinely failed or if they're victims of a massive systemic glitch.
And actually, the source claims it gets even wilder. Rohit Vadwan mentions another deeply concerning layer to this whole puzzle. He states there are reports of candidates with incredibly low scores, allegedly as low as 11 to 15 marks, who somehow ended up on the pass list. If that's true, it paints a picture of a completely upside-down system, where high scores get rejected and incredibly low scores are pushed through, fundamentally breaking the trust in the entire Tier 1 process.
Section 3. Fears for future tiers, the trust deficit. Think about it. If an objective, computer-graded test is throwing out these kinds of contradictory results, what on earth happens in the subjective Tier 2 interviews? According to the video, candidates are dealing with some very specific anxieties right now. First, there's this huge lack of transparent mark sharing. Most candidates don't even know their actual score unless they file an RTI. Second, there are growing fears of monetary influence or bribery, fueled entirely by how opaque Tier 1 was. And finally, the dread of unverified interview grading. I mean, if you can fail a multiple-choice test with a 204, how can you trust a subjective interview panel?
To really highlight this fear, the educator shares a story about a past candidate. This student walked out of their interview feeling amazing. They had prepped meticulously, answered everything perfectly, and gave a stellar performance. But when the final results were released, they just weren't selected.
And the worst part? Their interview marks were never officially released or explained. This historical pattern of behind-closed-doors grading leaves current candidates absolutely terrified that their hard work is just going to be arbitrarily dismissed. Section 4. A call for transparency. The demands.
So how do we actually fix this? The source lays out two very clear, actionable demands. Step 1, the board must publicly release the official cutoffs for all subjects and categories immediately. Nobody should have to file an RTI just to find out the basic passing criteria. Step 2, to fix this massive trust deficit for the next stage, the board needs to mandate video recording for all Tier 2 interviews. That way, if a candidate has failed, there's an objective, tangible record of their performance that can actually be reviewed.
The source backs this up with a really strong point about the money. The board reportedly charges a hefty 1,000 rupee fee just to process a candidate's formal query or objection. The educator argues that if the system is demanding such high fees for basic transparency, the candidates have every right to demand video proof of their interviews in return. It's just a matter of fair exchange and basic institutional accountability.
To sum up the absolute frustration running through the candidate community right now, the source video uses a catchphrase that translates to, "It's the KVS game where the passing student is failed." And that quote really hits the nail on the head. It captures the sheer exhaustion of candidates who feel they've played by the rules, scored the necessary marks, and are somehow still being pushed out by completely unexplained, opaque mechanisms.
And that brings us to a really crucial question I want to leave you with today. Zooming out from this specific exam, the source material points to a much larger issue. How can we ensure absolute transparency in these massive public examinations? When millions of futures and billions of rupees are on the line, shouldn't transparent cutoffs, clear grading criteria, and verifiable interview records be the absolute bare minimum? It's a question that demands answers, not just for the candidates dealing with this today, but for the integrity of our entire educational system tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.